Welcome, my name is Kim Andersen. I am a cloud consultant, cloud computing consultant here in South Africa. I have several years of experience in working in cloud computing. I have built out 2 massive large data centers in Northern Europe around cloud computing, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about cloud computing, and I will do that introduction around this for you. And I'm pleased that Source Code invited me to talk about this subject for the next couple of minutes. Cloud computing is, as such, nothing new. The absolute first cloud computing in the world that I know of is the telephone system. The telephone system shared a number of resources, and we all used that, and we were quite happy with that. So in essence, that all the IT systems and everything in the background was cloud computing. And that's what cloud computing today is also about in some form or format. And why has it suddenly taken off now? I actually want to give you a little background. About 10, 12 years ago, when the dot-com crash happened, and before that, a massive amount of broadband was rolled out all over the world that enabled us to collaborate. That collaboration was not just via telephone any longer, it was actually via collaboration tools. And companies suddenly had to view collaboration in a very different form that they hadn't thought of before, across continents and everyone working on the same project, etc. So they had to develop new software tools to actually handle that. Smart developers then found out that, hey, this is something we can use in another form. And the first software tools came about to actually utilize the servers across continents. At the same time, the advent of virtualization on the cheaper hardware and cheaper storage that now was also becoming available made it possible for us to reuse those resources and use those resources in a much more intelligent manner. Virtualization is nothing new. It's been on the mainframe for many, many, many years, but was very expensive and available to the few. So like Gutenberg released, and people from the darkness of not having access to any reading material, cloud computing has released software developers to have access to all the resources in the world that they can think of. And they can do that because virtualization enables us in a smart manner just to use some resources, be it compute, storage, or whatever, for just a period of time, without massive job to install, convince your boss to buy the tools needed and the hardware needed. We can just go ahead and consume that, pay a little amount of money for that period we need it. That is an awesome scenario for developers, because I think we all have tried that, where we had to go and convince our boss to buy hardware and software for something we thought would work out. We had to produce massive business cases. Now we can try it out for a small sum of money before we go back and produce the very big business case. Because when you then produce the big business case, you have to now say, what kind of cloud computing service would I like to consume? There are 5 major out there at the moment. One is called hosting as a service, where you're just using hardware and you have to install, you have to do everything yourself. But you don't have to kind of buy the hardware. It's not commonly used in Africa yet. It is kind of gaining momentum in Europe and America, but it takes a lot of your energy and time to do so. The second, and that's probably going to be a little bit more easy to consume, that's called infrastructure as a service. Someone has set up a number of parameters that you can buy 10 gigabytes of storage, and you can have 4 hours of compute power, and you can do this, that, and the other for that period of time with this amount of users, and then you pay a certain amount of money for that period. That one, I think, is going to be a lot easier for everyone to kind of live with. On top of that, for the developers, there's something called platform as a service, and that could be that you have a complete Java environment, you can have a complete Microsoft environment, you can have Microsoft code this Azure, others have Rackspace has another model, and you really just, whatever you need in order to do your software development and integration of various legacy systems, etc., will become aggregated inside those platforms as a service, and that's what you as a developer should be looking into, actually. The outcome of what you then produce, just like in the past where you produce some kind of software that would either be a product or it would be used inside a company only for them, well, something that the end user can use that is primarily called software as a service. It's usually a bigger package, it has everything included, and you can't really go and change a lot. There'll be a number of parameterization in the software, but the idea is that it's fairly uniform, and it could be a customer relation management system. You may have heard of something called Salesforce.com, good example of a software as a service solution, or Office 365 from Microsoft, a good example of a software as a service solution. Last but not least, and that's coming along with a kind of high degree, which is that we've now found out that we don't need everything in one go. We could maybe live with a little bit of it, and that's what's called business process as a service. That's the last part that is gaining traction, and a good example of that, for instance, be talent management. Talent management is something that we may not all be experts in. It's a very specialized area. We may need both some software to help us, but maybe also someone we can call and phone and ask, how do I do this, how do I do that? But it's a very niche part of a company, and that's a good example of business process as a service. And you can probably think of many, many other ways where you can go even deeper in that niche and then produce a little application that people would like to consume, and just for that. Then, developers. Developers, they actually now have the freedom that Gutenberg has given us as readers. As I said before, you now have indefinite resources available. You can quick start, you can do quick ramp down of your development test QA environment. You can try out ideas. I can highly recommend jump on the bandwagon. You may have heard of Andersen, and there'll be other available out there that you can just jump onto. Stavis has stuff. In general, many suppliers of this. I can see that also coming on board here in South Africa. I know there's been many cloud computing initiatives being done by the big companies here, and I can just see them also providing these services to each and every one out there. It will happen ultimately. A very important part of the cloud computing public space is open source. And open source provides all the tools for you to try it out. And it's tested and tried by millions of users, so I can say, go ahead, it's free. But it doesn't mean it solves all the needs of the world, because you also need to know about how to do integration into other packages. And here comes a very key element of why it's possible at all to use cloud computing, is that SOA and web services has kind of made a standard within this space. And by using them, I can now see that the world gets really flat, as Thomas Friedman said in his book. And we can now connect to a service in America, we can connect to a service in India, we can tie it up together with a service in Africa, and suddenly we have an application consisting of 3 different services with your brilliant thinking on top of it, and it works. And that means you're reusing. And instead of having to develop every single component yourself, you can now start reusing. It takes maybe elements of the technicality of the good old days out, but it produces return on agility. You become very agile, and you can meet the demand, whether it's your own business you're starting up, whether it is for your employer, or whether it's for someone else that you're developing the software. You can really become agile and deliver results very fast. And that is crucial for Africa, because Africa and South Africa is an SMB market, small to medium business. There are large corporations, and that's what you read about when you read about cloud computing, these massive data center transformation. But how many of us have a huge data center? Very few. And that's what you read in the press. Don't focus too much on that. Focus on the easy part, because they have their challenges, I can say. And you're probably working for them as well, and they will have many years of running traditional IT, and they will have cloud computing slowly taking off. But for you to focus on what's possible in cloud computing, you should think about the small to medium business segment as well. And cloud computing will be the backbone for those quick services, because those quick services are tailor-made for mobility. And the mobile world is IT for Africa. And Africa will be one of the most exciting places for cloud computing because of mobility. Because there is not enough network cables going around. You'll be using the mobile phone, for smartphones, for feature phone, to connect to the internet and to do your transactions that way across. So when we read about what's possible in America and Europe, don't translate it to Africa because they have a very different background. They all have broadband everywhere, so they will have different solutions for how to approach cloud computing. So I think the cloud computing story in Africa will be a different story than it will be in America and Europe and wherever we have all this amount of broadband. So with that, I can only say, as a developer, you stand great for opportunities and there's a great future in this and you can have a very good living out of this.